What would you believe if I told you that a single Mustang horse named Wildfire saved the lives of 42 people aboard a cargo plane? It sounds impossible, but that's exactly what happened on a cold Wyoming morning when a rehabilitated wild Mustang refused to budge in the front of an aircraft. The story begins with frustration, delayed flights, angry passengers, and a seemingly stubborn horse creating chaos at a small regional airport. But what unfolds is an extraordinary tale of animal intuition that left aviation experts, scientists, and witnesses in awe while horse handler Emma Whitaker desperately tried to move Wildfire from his position. The Mustang grew increasingly agitated. Whenever the pilot attempted to start the engines, airport staff were baffled, passengers grew impatient, and airline officials demanded the animal be forcibly removed. But Emma knew this wasn't typical behavior for her gentle, well-trained Mustang. Something was wrong, seriously wrong, when an experienced mechanic finally decided to investigate what the horse might be sensing. What he discovered sent chills down everyone's spine. A catastrophic mechanical failure was just minutes away from claiming dozens of lives. This is the remarkable story of Wildfire the Mustang, whose mysterious behavior transformed from an inconvenience into a miracle that no one present would ever forget. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn broke over the rugged mountains surrounding Bridger Creek, Wyoming, casting long shadows across Emma Whitaker's small ranch. The morning air carried the crisp scent of pine and the promise of winter. Emma, a weathered woman of 58 with silver streaks running through her dark hair, stood at the fence watching her prized Mustang, Wildfire, the magnificent chestnut stallion, trotted along the perimeter, his muscular form moving with the effortless grace that had first caught Emma's eye 3 years ago during the controversial wild horse roundup. His intelligent eyes seemed to understand the importance of today's journey. Today's the big day, boy. Emma called, her breath visible in the cold air. Jennifer's waiting for us in Denver. Wildfire nickered softly, trotting over Emma and nudging her shoulder with his muzzle. Their bond, forged through patience and mutual respect, was evident in that simple gesture. Emma's pickup truck rumbled down the gravel drive, pulling a horse trailer freshly painted with the words Scans Ranch Equine Therapy Program. She parked by the corral and stepped out, her movements deliberate, betraying the arthritis that had prompted her decision to send Wildfire to her daughter's therapy program in Colorado. Morning Emma called Michael Blackfoot, a longtime friend from the Wind River Reservation, who had helped Emma rehabilitate countless wild horses at 67. His face carried the lines of wisdom and hardship, but his eyes remained sharp as he assessed Wildfire. He seems to sense something's different today. Emma nodded, watching Wildfire's ears flick back and forth. He always knows too smart for his own good. Sometimes Michael helped Emma load Wildfire provisions in the truck. Still think fly him is better than the drive. Jennifer arranged everything. The flight's barely an hour compared to an 8-hour drive through mountain passes that might already have snowed. Besides, Emma gestured her hands, which she'd been rubbing against the cold. These old joints don't do well on long drives anymore. Michael nodded in, understanding they both seen too many Wyoming winters. Loading Wildfire into the trailer proceeded with surprising ease. The Mustang, normally cautious about confined spaces, a remnant of his traumatic roundup, walked willingly into the trailer after only minimal coaxing from Emma. That was easier than expected. Michael remarked. Emma patted Wildfire's neck. He's been through this routine before. It's like he knows he's helping people to drive to Jackson Hole Airport. Took just under an hour. The small regional facility primarily served tourists visiting the nearby national parks, but it also handled occasional cargo flights. Today, one of those flights would carry Wildfire to Denver. Emma pulled up to the cargo area where Luis Ortega, the ground crew supervisor, waited with a clipboard and a skeptical expression. Miss Whitaker, he confirmed, consulting his paperwork. Rocky Mountain Airways cargo flight 237 to Denver. Emma nodded, stepping out of her truck. That's us. Luis eyed Wildfire through the trailer window. Ma'am, I've loaded a lot of cargo, but not many horses. Are you sure will be comfortable in the plane's cargo section? He's traveled before. Emma reassured him. And this is a special arrangement. I understand the cargo area is configured for animal transport today. Luis nodded reluctantly. Captain Hayes requested a briefing with you before we load the horse inside the small cargo operations office. Captain Daniel Hayes studied the flight plan at 52. Hayes had the confident bearing of a man who had spent half his life in cockpits, his weathered face and salt and pepper hair spoke of experience, while his alert eyes missed nothing. Captain Hayes. Emma extended her hand. Emma Whitaker, thank you for accommodating Wildfire on your flight. Hayes shook her hand firmly. Miss Whitaker, I understand your horse is headed for a therapy program. My father benefited greatly from one. After his stroke, Emma's expression softened. Your father was lucky. These programs do wonders. My daughter Jennifer runs one in Colorado. Wildfire's joining her program permanently. The captain nodded thoughtfully. I reviewed the arrangements. We have a specialized cargo configuration today with adequate ventilation and securing mechanisms of flights only 60 minutes. So your horse won't be confined long. I appreciate that. Wildfire is good with travel, but he can be sensitive to his surroundings. Post Officer James Bennett entered a younger man with the crisp efficiency of former military fuel. Check. Complete. Captain Weir. Clear for departure in 30 minutes. Thank you, James. This is Miss Whitaker, owner of the horse. We're transporting. Bennett nodded. Politely, ma'am. We'll take good care of your horse. Emma followed the pilots outside, where Luis's team were preparing to load. Wildfire, the cargo plane, smaller than commercial passenger aircraft, had its rear loading ramp extended. Easy now, Emma murmured as she led Wildfire from the trailer. The Mustang's ears flicked forward with interest rather than fear as they approached the plane. Several passengers aflight carried both cargo, and a small number of travelers in its forward section watched with interest from the terminal windows. He's beautiful, remarked Mia Rodriguez, the flight attendant assigned to the limited passenger section. I grew up around horses, but I've never seen a Mustang this well behaved. Emma smiled with pride. He was completely wild. 3 years ago. Took months before he let me touch him. Wildfire walked calmly up the loading ramp, his hooves making hollow sounds on the metal surface. Inside a specially prepared area with padding and securing straps awaited. Emma guided him into position, speaking softly into his ear. That's it, boy, just a short flight. And Jennifer will be waiting. Captain Hayes observed from the doorway. We've transported horses before, but usually they're more nervous about the confined space. Wildfire special. Emma replied, securing the first safety strap around the horse's midsection. He has an unusual awareness about him. Luis approached with the remaining straps. We need to finish securing him. Mom, takeoff is in 20 minutes. Emma worked methodically, ensuring Wildfire was properly secured while maintaining his comfort. The Mustang remained calm, though his eyes tracked every movement in the cargo hold with unusual intensity. All set, Emma announced finally. I'll just stay with him until a sudden change came over Wildfire. His ears pinned back in his nostrils flared. A ripple of tension moved through his powerful body. What's wrong? Captain Hayes asked, noticing the change. Emma frowned. I'm not sure. He was fine a moment ago. The ground crew began removing the loading equipment, preparing to close the cargo door. Wildfire's agitation increased. He tossed his head, pulling against the safety straps. Easy, boy, Emma soothed, placing a hand on his neck. She felt his muscles trembling beneath her palm. Miss Whitaker, we need to close up now. Louise called. We're on a tight schedule. Emma nodded, distractedly, still focused on Wildfire. I know. Just give me a minute. Something's bothering him. Captain Hayes, check his watch. I need complete pre-flight checks. We be all right. Yes, he just needs to settle. Emma assured him, though uncertainty crept into her voice. Wildfire had never behaved this way during transport before the pilots returned to the cockpit. While Emma continued trying to calm Wildfire, the Mustang's breathing had quickened, his eyes wide and alert when the cargo door finally closed with a hydraulic hiss. He seemed to grow even more restless. Emma buckled herself into a jump seat nearby, prepared to keep Wildfire company during the short flight. Airport workers moved equipment away from the plane as the pilots ran through their pre-flight checklist in the cockpit. Captain Hayes adjusted his headset. Tower, this is Rocky Mountain 237. Requesting clearance for taxi. The engines began their initial spool-up sequence, a low whine building gradually to a roar in the cargo hold. Wildfire's reaction was immediate and alarming. The Mustang reared up as much as his restraints will allow, letting out a panic whinny that echoed to the metal confines of the hold. Wildfire, easy. Emma struggled to her feet, hampered by her own safety belt. The horse's eyes were wide with fear, his nostrils flared. He stomped repeatedly, pulling hard against the straps. Emma hit the intercom button, connecting to the cockpit. Captain, something's wrong with Wildfire. He's extremely agitated by the engines. Hayes' voice came back, concern evident despite the static. Can you secure him, Miss Whitaker? We're clear for taxi. I'm trying, but I've never seen him like this. Emma reached for Wildfire, speaking in soothing tones that had no effect. The Mustang continued to struggle, his powerful body straining against the Restraints in the cockpit, Hayes exchanged a concerned glance with Bennett. We can't take off with an unsecured animal. It's dangerous. For everyone, Hayes cut the engines, and the sudden silence was filled only by Wildfire's heavy breathing and the occasional stamp of his hoof. Emma approached cautiously, murmuring reassurances. What happened, boy? What spooked you? The cargo door reopened, and Louise peered inside. Everything okay in here? We have a schedule to maintain. Emma shook her head. Something's wrong. He was fine, until the engine started. Captain Hayes appeared behind Lewis MS Whitaker. We can't delay indefinitely. Is this normal behavior for your horse? No, absolutely not. Wildfire is typically very calm during transport. Emma stroked the Mustang's neck, feeling his racing pulse. I don't understand what's happening. Hayes considered the situation. Let's try again. I'll start the engines more gradually. This time Emma nodded, though doubt clouded her features. I'll stay right within the cargo door, closed once more, and Emma secured herself while keeping a hand on Wildfire in the cockpit. Hayes initiated the engine startup sequence at a much slower pace. Initially, Wildfire remained calm, but as the engine sound increased past a certain threshold, the horse's demeanor changed drastically. He began stomping and tossing his head, his eyes wild with what appeared to be genuine fear, rather than simple agitation. Emma hit the intercom again. Captain, please stop. He's getting worse. Hayes cut the power immediately. This isn't working. The situation escalated quickly. After that, Thomas Gardner, the airline operations manager, arrived looking harried. An impatient airport manager, Benjamin Parker, joined him along with Louise and Captain Hayes, all converging to the cargo hold, where Emma stood protectively beside Wildfire and Whitaker. Gardner began, his voice tight with suppressed frustration. We have a schedule to maintain. This flight is already 20 minutes delayed. I understand, Emma replied, but something is seriously wrong. Wildfire has never behaved like this. Gardner consulted his clipboard. We have connecting cargo in Denver and passengers with tight schedules. Can your horse be transported another way? Emma bristled. He's not just cargo, Mr. Gardner. And something is genuinely frightening him about this plane. Animals get nervous during air travel. Gardner dismissed. It's not uncommon, Captain. Hayes, who had been watching Wildfire, thoughtfully spoke up. Actually, I've transported horses before, and this seems different. He wasn't agitated until the specific moment we started the engines. Parker sighed heavily. What are our options here? We can't keep a plane grounded because a horse is having a bad day. I can sedate him, Emma offered reluctantly. I have medications in my truck, though I've never needed them for Wildfire before. Hayes looked uncertain. Sedating an already distressed animal for air transport isn't ideal. What if we try moving him to a different position? In the cargo hold, Louise suggested. Maybe something about this location is bothering him. Emma nodded. It's worth trying. The team loosened Wildfire's restraints, and Emma attempted to lead him forward away from his current position near the front of the cargo area. The Mustang planted his hooves, firmly refusing to budge. He tossed his head and snorted, clearly communicating his refusal. Come on, Wildfire. Emma urged, gentle but firm. The horse remained immovable, his eyes fixed on something near the front bulkhead of the cargo compartment. Is he always a stubborn? Gardner asked, exasperation evident. No, Emma replied, her concern growing. He's trying to tell us something telling, and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. By now, a small crowd had gathered around the cargo hold. Several passengers peered curiously from a safe distance, while airport staff whispered among themselves. The delay was becoming a significant issue. This is unacceptable, Gardner declared, checking his watch again. We have 12 passengers in the cabin and time-sensitive cargo. Emma stood her ground. I understand your frustration, but Wildfire's behavior isn't normal. Something is wrong, Frank. Donovan, a business executive from the passenger cabin, approached with evident irritation. What's the holdup? I have a meeting in Denver in 3 hours. We're dealing with an animal transport issue, Sir. Gardner explained tersely. Donovan glanced at Wildfire with disdain. You're delaying an entire flight for a horse. This is ridiculous. Sir, please return to the passenger area, Hayes instructed firmly. We're handling the situation. As Donovan reluctantly withdrew, an elderly woman approached slowly. Sarah Peterson, her silver hair neatly pinned back, carried herself with the confident posture of someone who had spent decades around livestock. Pardon me, she said, addressing Emma directly. I couldn't help noticing what's happening. I raised horses on our ranch for 40 years. Mind if I take a look? Emma nodded gratefully. Please do. He's never acted this way before. Sarah observed Wildfire, carefully noting his fixed gaze and rigid posture. He's not just being stubborn. See how he's focused on that specific area, and his nostrils are flaring rhythmically, sensing something. Hayes watched with Growing concern, sensing what exactly, Sarah shook her head. Horses have incredibly acute senses. They can detect things we can't. Smells, vibrations, even changes in air pressure. Gardner scoffed. Are you suggesting the horse knows something about my aircraft that we don't? I'm suggesting, Sarah replied evenly, that dismissing animal behavior without understanding it might be unwise. Emma moved the area. Wildfire kept focusing on the forward bulkhead, separating the cargo area from the fuel tanks and electrical systems. The horse watched her intently, ears pricked forward. There's nothing here, Louise said, joining her inspection. All cargo was loaded according to regulations. Captain Hayes, however, appeared thoughtful. This section houses some of the fuel line connections and electrical routing to the engines. Could there be a leak? Emma asked, suddenly alarmed. Something Wildfire might smell that we can't. Hayes' expression turned serious. Aircraft fuel has added odorants, specifically so humans can detect leaks. If there were a significant leak, we'd smell it too. Not necessarily, Sarah interjected. A horse's sense of smell is far more sensitive than ours. They can detect scent at concentrations we'd never notice. Gardner's patience was clearly wearing thin. This is absurd. We completed all standard pre-flight checks. Every system is functioning normally. Then let me suggest something, Hayes said diplomatically. Let's bring in our mechanic to perform an additional inspection of the specific area. If nothing's found, we proceed as planned and waste even more time. Gardner protested. Better safe than sorry, Hayes replied with the quiet authority of a veteran pilot who had seen his share of close calls. While they waited for mechanic, Emma continued her attempts to calm Wildfire, who remained fixated on the same area, but had stopped actively struggling against his restraints. What do you see, boy? She whispered, following his gaze. What are you trying to tell us in the passenger cabin? Tensions were rising. Mia Rodriguez, the flight attendant, did her best to soothe frustrated travelers. I apologize for continued delay, she announced. We're addressing a minor issue with the cargo and should be underway shortly. Minor issue? Donovan scoffed loudly. It's been nearly an hour. What kind of airline lets a horse dictate the flight schedule, sir? I understand your frustration, Mia replied professionally. The captain is ensuring all safety protocols are followed. Carol Matthews, an older passenger with evident flight anxiety, leaned across the aisle. Is everything all right with the plane? Is that why we're delayed? Everything is fine, ma'am, Mia assured her. Just a small issue with animal transport nearby. 8-year-old David Miller pressed his face against a window. Mom, I can see the horse. He looks scared. As Mother Maria placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. I'm sure he's just nervous about flying, honey, just like some people get back in the cargo hold. Jake Wilson, the airline senior mechanic, arrived with his toolbox and a skeptical expression. At 41, Jake had been maintaining aircraft for 15 years and had heard every superstition and strange theory about mechanical failures. So you want to check this section because a horse is acting funny? He asked, raising an eyebrow. I know how it sounds, Hayes admitted, but humor me, Jake. Something doesn't feel right about this. Jake shrugged and set down his toolbox. You're the captain. Where exactly should I look? Emma pointed the area of Wildfire's focus. He keeps staring at this part of the bulkhead. That's where the main fuel lines connect to the left engine, Jake explained, removing an access panel. But we checked all fuel systems during regular maintenance 3 days ago. As Jake began his inspection, Wildfire grew increasingly alert, his ears pricked forward and nostrils flaring. Emma stroked his neck, feeling the tension in his muscles. Easy, boy, they're checking it out. Jake shined his flashlight into the access area, his movements methodical and practiced. At first, his expression remained neutral, then slowly changed to one of concentration. Hand me that small mirror, he said to his assistant Tim Sullivan, who had joined him. Jake extended the mirror into a narrow gap, angling it to see around a bend in the compartment. The silence stretched as Jake focused intently on whatever he was seeing. Well, Gardner prompted impatiently, is there an actual issue, or can we finally depart? Jake withdrew the mirror slowly, his expression now deadly serious. There is definitely a problem. Hayes moved closer. What kind of problem? The kind that could have turned very bad. Jake replied grimly. There's a hairline crack in one of the fuel line fittings. It's seeping fuel, not enough to smell strongly or show up on pressure tests. But as their collective chill seemed to sweep through the gathered group, where exactly is it leaking? Hayes asked. Right next to an electrical harness, Jake said, pointing into the compartment. The vibration from engine startup was causing the harness to shift closer to the leak. Another few minutes of operation, and we might have had fuel contacting a potential ignition source. Emma's hand went to her mouth. I mean, Jake stated flatly, this could have developed into an in-flight fire, possibly during takeoff, when we're most vulnerable. Gardner's face had palled considerably. You're certain? See for yourself, Jake offered, handing him the mirror. Gardner Look, then stepped back, visibly shaken. All eyes turned to Wildfire, who stood calmly now as if satisfied that his message had finally been understood. Unbelievable, Louise whispered. The horse actually detected a fuel leak that the instruments missed. Sarah Peterson nodded knowingly. Horses have saved people for centuries by sensing dangers we can't perceive. My grandfather used to tell stories about pit ponies in coal mines who refused to enter tunnels before cave-ins. Captain Hayes turned to Emma, his expression a mixture of amazement and professional concern. Ms. Whitaker, I believe your horse just prevented what could have been a very serious incident. Emma stroked Wildfire's muzzle, her eyes glistening with pride and relief. He's always been special, but this is extraordinary. I'll need to file a full safety report. Hayes continued addressing Gardner. And this aircraft will require repairs before it can be cleared for a flight. Gardner, still processing the implications, nodded mutely. His earlier impatience had day completely evaporated. What about the passengers and cargo? Louise asked. We'll need to arrange alternative transportation, Gardner replied, finding his voice. I'll contact dispatch immediately. As the group dispersed to handle various aspects of the disrupted flight, Emma remained with Wildfire, quietly praising him. Sarah Peterson approached her, expression thoughtful. You know, she said softly, in all my years around horses, I've heard stories like this, but never witnessed it myself. Your Wildfire is truly remarkable. Emma nodded. We rescued each other in a way. After my husband died, the ranch was too much to handle alone. Working with the wild Mustangs gave me purpose again. Sarah smiled warmly. Well, it seems like he's returning the favor. Many times over today in the passenger cabin, Mia was explaining the situation to the increasingly restless travelers. Ladies and gentlemen, I regret to inform you that this flight has been canceled due to a mechanical issue. The airline is arranging alternative transportation to Denver as we speak. A chorus of groans and complaints rose from the passengers. What kind of mechanical issue? Asked Richard Donaldson, a retired rancher. Mia hesitated, choosing her words carefully. A potential fuel system problem was identified during our extended pre-flight inspection. And how exactly was it found? Frank Donovan demanded. We've been sitting here for over an hour while they checked a perfectly good plane because a horse got spooked. An unexpected voice answered from the back of the cabin. That horse saved your life. Mr. All heads turned to see Jake Wilson standing in the doorway, still holding his tools. I've been maintaining aircraft for 15 years. Jake continued, addressing the entire cabin. What I just found was a hairline crack in a fuel line fitting position right next to an electrical connection. The vibration from takeoff would likely have caused fuel to contact an ignition source. A stunned silence fell over the cabin. Are you saying we could crash? Carol Matthews asked, her voice trembling. I'm saying, Jake replied solemnly, that somehow that horse detected a fuel leak that our instruments missed, and that would have likely caused an in-flight fire. So maybe cut the animals some slack for the delay. Outside, the aircraft news of what had happened spread quickly through the small airport. Benjamin Parker, the airport manager, was on the phone with Rocky Mountain Airways headquarters. Yes, sir, that's correct. The horse apparently detected a fuel leak before our equipment did. No, I'm not joking. The mechanic confirmed it was a critical safety issue. Yes, the full incident report is being prepared now. Nearby, Olivia Caldwell, the environmental filmmaker who had been scheduled to fly to Denver, was recording the scene on her camera as a documentarian focused on wild horse preservation. She recognized a significant story unfolding before her. This is incredible, she said to Emma as they watched Wildfire being carefully unloaded from the cargo hold. A wild Mustang, potentially saving dozens of lives by sensing something humans and technology missed. Emma nodded, keeping her hand on Wildfire's neck as he stepped cautiously down the ramp. This is who they are, these wild horses. They've evolved incredible sensory abilities to survive in harsh environments. We're only beginning to understand what they're capable of. News of the incident reached the small terminal where passengers were gathering to await information about alternative transportation. The initial anger over the delay had transformed into shocked gratitude. As the full story emerged, Captain Hayes approached Emma as Wildfire was being led back to the horse trailer. Miss Whitaker, he began, extending his hand. I owe you and Wildfire an apology for doubting his behavior, and my profound thanks for potentially saving everyone on my aircraft. Emma shook his hand. Wildfire deserves all the credit. I'm just relieved someone finally listened to what he was trying to tell us. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. In 25 years of flying, I've learned that sometimes the most sophisticated technology isn't a match for instinct, and experience today was a powerful reminder of that lesson. As Emma prepared to load Wildfire back into his trailer, she was approached by Thomas Gardner, whose demeanor had completely transformed. M. Whitaker, he said, his earlier impatience replaced by sincere humility on behalf of Rocky. Mountain Airways, I want to extend our deepest gratitude to our maintenance team. We'll be conducting a thorough investigation into how this leak was missed during routine inspections. What about getting Wildfire to Denver? Emma asked. My daughter is expecting him today. Gardner nodded. We're arranging another aircraft that will be ready in approximately 3 hours, and he added with a slight smile, the airline would like to offer complimentary transport for Wildfire as a small token of our appreciation. Emma laughed softly. Well, after today, I think he's earned at least that. As Emma led Wildfire back to his trailer for a rest before their rescheduled flight, she couldn't help marveling at the day's events. The Mustang walked beside her calmly, his earlier agitation completely gone now that the danger had been addressed. You never cease to amaze me, she whispered to him, stroking his powerful neck. Wait until Jennifer hears about this. Wildfire snorted softly in response, as if to say his actions were nothing extraordinary, just another day in the remarkable life of a once wild Mustang, whose keen senses and determined spirit had forged an unbreakable bond with the humans who had earned his trust. 3 hours later, the small Jackson Hole airport was buzzing with activity unlike anything it had seen in months. What had begun as a routine cargo flight had transformed into something approaching a local sensation. Airport staff, who hadn't been involved in the original incident, were finding excuses to walk past Emma's horse trailer, hoping to catch a glimpse of the remarkable Mustang. Wildfire stood calmly in the trailer, occasionally nickering softly. When Emma approached, she had used the unexpected delay to ensure he was comfortable, providing fresh water, some hay, and a good brushing to help him relax. After the stressful morning, you're quite the celebrity now, Emma told him, brushing his gleaming chestnut coat. Though fame was never something you cared about, was the Mustang's intelligent eyes seemed to agree as he nudged Emma's pocket, searching for the apple slices he knew she carried. Always thinking with your stomach. She laughed, offering him a treat nearby. Olivia Caldwell was interviewing Jake Wilson about the technical aspects of what had happened. Her documentary camera captured his detailed explanation of the fuel leak's location and potential consequences. In your professional opinion, Olivia asked, what might have happened if the flight had proceeded as scheduled? Jake removed his cap, running a hand through his hair before answering carefully. Best case scenario, our systems might have detected the problem once it worsened in flight, allowing for an emergency landing. Worst case, he paused. Fuel contacting electrical components at high temperatures could have resulted in a fire or explosion, particularly during the stress of takeoff or landing, and standard pre-flight checks didn't catch this issue. That's what's most concerning. Jake admitted the crack was so fine and the leak so minimal that it didn't register on our pressure tests or visual inspections. Yet somehow that horse detected it immediately. Olivia turned her camera toward Wildfire in the distance. Do you have any explanation for how he could sense something your equipment missed? I'm a mechanic, not a biologist, Jake replied with a shrug. But I've heard horses have an incredibly acute sense of smell. They can detect scent at concentrations far lower than humans can perceive. Aviation fuel has a distinct odor, and maybe Wildfire picked up on traces that were too faint for us. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. And this wasn't just a routine. Emma laughed softly. Well, after today, I think he's earned at least that. As Emma led Wildfire back to his trailer for a rest before their rescheduled flight, she couldn't help marveling at the day's events. The Mustang walked beside her calmly, his earlier agitation completely gone now that the danger had been addressed. You never cease to amaze me, she whispered to him, stroking his powerful neck. Wait until Jennifer hears about this. Wildfire snorted softly in response, as if to say his actions were nothing extraordinary, just another day in the remarkable life of a once wild Mustang, whose keen senses and determined spirit had forged an unbreakable bond with the humans who had earned his trust. 3 hours later, the small Jackson Hole airport was buzzing with activity unlike anything it had seen in months. What had begun as a routine cargo flight had transformed into something approaching a local sensation. Airport staff, who hadn't been involved in the original incident, were finding excuses to walk past Emma's horse trailer, hoping to catch a glimpse of the remarkable Mustang. Wildfire stood calmly in the trailer, occasionally nickering softly. When Emma approached, she had used the unexpected delay to ensure he was comfortable, providing fresh water, some hay, and a good brushing to help him relax. After the stressful morning, you're quite the celebrity now, Emma told him, brushing his gleaming chestnut coat. Though fame was never Something you care about was that the Mustang's intelligent eyes seemed to agree as he nudged Emma's pocket, searching for the apple slices he knew she carried, always thinking with your stomach. She laughed, offering him a treat nearby. Olivia Caldwell was interviewing Jake Wilson about the technical aspects of what had happened. Her documentary camera captured his detailed explanation of the fuel leak's location and potential consequences. In your professional opinion, Olivia asked what might have happened if the flight had proceeded as scheduled. Jake removed his cap, running a hand through his hair before answering carefully. Best case scenario, our systems might have detected the problem once it worsened in flight, allowing for an emergency landing. Worst case, he paused. Fuel contacting electrical components at high temperatures could have resulted in a fire or explosion, particularly during the stress of takeoff or landing, and standard pre-flight checks didn't catch this issue. That's what's most concerning, Jake admitted. The crack was so fine and the leak so minimal that it didn't register on our pressure tests or visual inspections. Yet somehow that horse detected it immediately. Olivia turned her camera toward Wildfire in the distance. Do you have any explanation for how he could sense something your equipment missed? I'm a mechanic, not a biologist, Jake replied with a shrug. But I've heard horses have an incredibly acute sense of smell. They can detect scents at concentrations far lower than humans can perceive. Aviation fuel has a distinct odor, and maybe Wildfire picked up on traces that were too faint for us. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. And this wasn't just a routine case of an animal being nervous about flying. Absolutely not. Jake stated firmly that horse was focused on a specific area of the aircraft, exactly where the problem was located. This wasn't random behavior. As Olivia continued her interviews, a small crowd had gathered near the administrative offices where Captain Hayes was filling out incident reports. Word had spread beyond the airport, and local media had begun to arrive. Sam Harrison, a reporter from the Bridger Creek Gazette, approached Emma as she tended to Wildfire. Miss Whitaker. Sam Harrison from the Gazette, I was hoping to ask you a few questions about your remarkable horse. Emma looked up from her grooming, a hint of weariness in her expression. He's not a circus attraction, Mr. Harrison, of course not, Sam assured her quickly. But what happened today is extraordinary. A formerly wild Mustang, potentially saving dozens of lives. That's a story people should hear, especially with the ongoing debates about wild horse management in Wyoming. Emma's expression softened slightly at the mention of wild horse conservation, a cause close to her heart. Wildfire is special, but his abilities aren't unique among Mustangs. They've evolved incredibly acute senses to survive in the wild. That's exactly the angle I'd like to explore, Sam replied eagerly, how these natural abilities translate to unexpected benefits in human environments. Before Emma could respond, she noticed Ranger Bill Collins approaching the Forest Service. Ranger had been involved in the Mustang roundup where she'd first encountered Wildfire 3 years ago. Emma, Bill called out with a wave. Just heard what happened, had to come see this miracle horse for myself. Emma greeted him with a weary smile. Hello, Bill, news travels fast, small town, he replied with a shrug, especially when it involves a potential disaster averted at our airport. Bill approached the trailer, studying Wildfire with newfound respect. I hard to believe this is the same wild stallion that gave us such trouble during the roundup. He was one of the most resistant to capture I'd ever seen. He still has that independent spirit, Emma acknowledged, but he's channeled it into something remarkable. I remember you arguing against separating him from his herd, Bill recalled, said he showed unusual intelligence and leadership qualities. Emma nodded, stroking Wildfire's neck. He was a herd sentinel, always the first to detect predators and lead the others to safety. Those instincts saved lives then, just as they did today. Sam Harrison jotted notes furiously as he listened to their conversation. The herd sentinel, that's fascinating. So his behavior today was essentially an extension of his role in the wild. Exactly, Emma confirmed. Mustangs that survive in harsh wilderness develop extraordinary awareness of their surroundings. Wildfire was just doing what came naturally to him, identifying a threat and alerting to it. As they talked, Dr. Marcus Reynolds approached the group. The 62-year-old equine veterinarian had been among the passengers on the canceled flight, and his professional curiosity had been piqued by the unfolding events. Part of my intrusion, he said, introducing himself. I'm Dr. Reynolds, equine specialist from Colorado State. I couldn't help overhearing your discussion about this remarkable animal. Emma welcomed the veterinarian's interest. He's certainly living up to his name today. Wildfire spreading excitement everywhere. Dr. Reynolds chuckled. Indeed, I'd be very interested in your perspective on his sensory capabilities, particularly his apparent ability to detect the fuel leak. Horses have approximately 300 million olfactory receptors compared to our 6 Million Drive Reynolds explained to a growing audience their sense of smell is comparable to dogs in many ways combined with their acute hearing and sensitivity to vibration. They can detect anomalies we would completely miss, but to connect that sensory input to potential danger and then deliberately alert humans, Sam asked, that suggests remarkable intelligence, and trust Emma added wild horses. Naturally avoid anything unfamiliar or threatening the fact that Wildfire was willing to enter the aircraft at all shows his trust in humans when he detected the problem. He was essentially communicating across species barriers inside the terminal. The dynamics among the delayed passengers had shifted dramatically. What had begun as frustration over an inconvenient delay had transformed into fascinated discussions about the horse that had potentially saved their lives. Frank Donovan, the impatient businessman who had been most vocal about the delay, now stood by the window watching the activity around Wildfire's trailer with chastened expression. "I feel like such an ass," he admitted to Mia Rodriguez, who was distributing meal vouchers to the waiting passengers. "I was ready to demand they remove that horse from the plane by any means necessary." Mia nodded understandingly. It's a natural reaction when travel plans are disrupted. Most people would have felt the same way. Still, Frank mused, it's humbling to think an animal could detect something all our technology missed nearby. David Miller pressed his face against the window watching Wildfire with undisguised admiration. "Mom, can we go see the hero horse up close before our new flight?" Maria Miller smiled at her son's enthusiasm. "We'll see, honey. He's probably tired after all the excitement." "But he saved us," David insisted. "I want to thank him." Richard Donaldson, the retired rancher, overheard the boy's request. "The lad has a point. That animal deserves our gratitude." Meanwhile, Thomas Gardner was on the phone with Paul Weber, the airline CEO, explaining the extraordinary circumstances of the flight cancellation. "Yes, sir, I understand how it sounds," Gardner said, pacing nervously, but the maintenance inspection confirmed that the crack was precisely where the horse had focused its attention. "No, so there's no possibility of coincidence. Multiple witnesses observed the animal's behavior." He listened for a moment, then continued. "The safety implications are significant. Our standard inspection protocols missed this entirely." "Yes, I agree completely. A full review is warranted." As Gardner concluded his call, Captain Hayes approached with a stack of completed reports. "Everything's filed." Hayes informed him the FAA has been notified, and they're sending an inspector to examine the aircraft. Gardner nodded, still looking slightly dazed by the day's events. "Weber wants photographs and documentation of the defect. He's also requesting a complete maintenance history review already initiated." Hayes confirmed Jake's team is tracing the manufacturing history of the specific fitting. "That failed preliminary assessment suggests a materials defect that worsened over time." "And what about our horse?" "Whisper out there." Gardner gestured toward the window where Wildfire could be seen. Hayes smiled slightly. "That's the part no one's going to believe without witnessing it firsthand. I've included detailed statements from multiple witnesses in my report. Outside preparations for the replacement flight were underway. A different cargo aircraft had been flown in from Denver, and ground crews were preparing it for departure. Luis Ortega supervised the activity with meticulous attention to detail. I want every system CH checked." He instructed his team, especially the fuel lines, after what happened. "Today, we're taking no chances." Emma watched the preparations from a distance, her hand resting lightly on Wildfire's neck. The day had taken an unexpected turn, transforming what should have been a routine transport into something much more significant. "Miss Whitaker," a voice called from behind. Emma turned to see Sarah Peterson approaching, slowly leaning on her husband George's arm. "I wanted to thank you and your remarkable horse before we board our new flight," Sarah said warmly. "In all my years with horses, I've seen them do extraordinary things, but nothing quite like this." Emma smiled. "Thank you for speaking up earlier. If you hadn't validated Wildfire's behavior, they might never have checked the aircraft." "Experience recognizes experience," Sarah replied with a knowing nod. "I could see that your horse wasn't merely being difficult. He was trying to communicate." George Peterson, a tall man with military bearing, added, "In my Army days, we relied on technology to keep us safe, but sometimes the most sophisticated sensors weren't a match for a well-trained dog's nose or a local guide's instincts. Nature still has a few lessons to teach us." Emma agreed as they continued talking. Jake Wilson emerged from beneath the original aircraft, wiping his hands on a rag. He approached the growing group around Wildfire's trailer. "Thought you might want to see this," he said, holding up a small metal fitting. "This is the culprit, a hairline fracture that was slowly worsening another flight cycle or two, and we have had a major fuel leak during operation." He turned the fitting to show the barely visible crack. which appeared as a dark line against the metal surface. What amazes me is that the leak at this stage would have been minuscule, just molecules of fuel vapor escaping, yet Wildfire detected it. Immediately, Emma noted proudly, and refused to let us ignore. Jake added with newfound respect, makes you wonder how many other close calls in aviation history might have been averted with. A good horse on board. The comment drew laughter from the group. Breaking some of the tension that had built throughout the day, Benjamin Parker approached with an update. The replacement aircraft has passed all inspections and is ready for boarding. Will begin with passengers first, then load Wildfire. Once everyone settled, Emma nodded. Thank you, will be ready. As Parker walked away, Olivia Caldwell rejoined the group. Her camera now lowered. Emma, would you be open to an interview for my documentary? This incident perfectly illustrates what I've been trying to show about wild horse intelligence and how their natural abilities can benefit humans. Emma considered the request thoughtfully. If it helps people understand why these wild horses are worth protecting, then yes, I'd be willing. Excellent, Olivia beamed. Perhaps once you're settled in Denver, I'd love to film Wildfire in his new environment at the therapy program as well. I think my daughter would welcome that. Emma replied, Jennifer's always looking for ways to showcase the benefits of equine therapy. Preparations continue for the rescheduled flight. Emma took a moment to step away from the growing crowd. She led Wildfire to a quieter spot near the edge of the tarmac, where the magnificent Mustang could graze on a patch of grass while they waited. Quite a day we're having, she murmured, stroking his forehead. You've always been special, but now everyone sees it. Wildfire nickered softly, nudging her hand in a gesture that had become familiar over their years together, a simple communication between two species that had learned to trust and understand each other. In the distance, the replacement aircraft stood ready, its cargo door open and waiting. But for this brief moment, Emma allowed herself to marvel at the journey that had brought them here, from a wild Mustang running free in the high plains to a perceptive partner whose extraordinary senses had potentially saved dozens of lives. As the sun began its descent toward the Teton Range, casting long shadows across the airfield, Emma knew that whatever happened next, Wildfire's legacy was secure. His story would be told and retold, a powerful testament to the remarkable abilities of these wild horses and the importance of preserving their place in the American landscape. Boarding for the replacement flight began as the afternoon sun cast a golden glow across the tarmac. Passengers filed onto the aircraft with a markedly different attitude than earlier in the day. Their conversations were animated, many pausing to glance back at Wildfire's trailer. Before climbing the boarding stairs, Captain Hayes stood at the base of the stairs, personally greeting each passenger with an old-school gesture not often seen in modern aviation, but today seemed to warrant the personal touch. Welcome aboard, he said warmly to Sarah and George Peterson. I promise a smoother experience this time around. Sarah smiled, patting his arm. After what we avoided today, a little delay seems trivial, doesn't it? Inside the terminal, Barry Jenkins, an FAA inspector who happened to be at Jackson Hole for a routine visit, was reviewing the incident reports with growing interest. At 50, Jenkins had investigated hundreds of aviation incidents, but none quite like this. Let me make sure I understand, he said to Benjamin Parker. The Mustang refused to allow the engines to start focusing on a specific area of the aircraft, which when inspected revealed a potentially catastrophic fuel line defect. Parker nodded. I know how it sounds, but I witnessed it myself. So did Captain Hayes and at least a dozen others. Jenkins removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. Actually, it's not as unprecedented as you might think. Animals have been known to detect things our technology misses. There are documented cases of pets alerting owners to gas leaks, earthquakes, even medical emergencies. But in aviation, Parker asked skeptically. Less common, Jenkins admitted, but only because we don't typically have animals in position to alert us. The sophisticated systems on modern aircraft are designed to detect mechanical failures, but they're not infallible. This incident might highlight a blind spot in our safety protocols. Parker raised an eyebrow. You think we should start employing horses as safety inspectors? Jenkins chuckled. Not exactly. But it does suggest we might need to rethink certain inspection procedures, particularly around minute fuel leaks that could worsen during flight. Outside, final preparations were underway for Wildfire's boarding. The replacement aircraft's cargo area had been prepared identically to the original plane, with one significant difference: an extensive inspection of the fuel systems had been performed. Under Jake Wilson's supervision, all clear, Jake reported to Captain Hayes. I personally checked every inch of the fuel lines, especially around the connection points. Everything's in perfect working order. Hayes nodded gratefully. Thank you for your thoroughness, Jake. I don't think anyone here wants another unexpected delay or potential disaster. Jake added solemnly nearby. Emma, with preparing Wildfire for the second boarding attempt, the Mustang seemed completely relaxed now, showing none of the agitation that had characterized his behavior earlier. Ready for take two, boy, Emma murmured, securing his halter. Let's hope for a smoother experience this time. Dr. Marcus Reynolds approached as Emma guided Wildfire toward the cargo ramp. Mind if I observe his behavior during boarding from a scientific perspective? It will be fascinating to see how he responds to the replacement aircraft. Emma nodded, of course. Though I suspect he'll be perfectly calm now that the danger has been addressed. Reynolds fell into step beside them. That's precisely what interests me. If he truly detected the fuel leak on the other aircraft, he should show no such concern with this. One Luis Ortega met them at the cargo hold, his earlier skepticism replaced with genuine respect. Miss Whitaker, we prepared everything exactly as before. I'll be personally overseeing the securing process. Thank you, Luis, Emma replied. I appreciate the extra attention. As Wildfire approached the loading ramp, a hush fell over the gathered airport staff. All eyes watched for any sign of the earlier distress. The Mustang's ears flicked forward with interest, but he showed no hesitation as Emma guided him up the ramp and into the cargo hold. Look at that, Dr. Reynolds remarked quietly. Completely different behavior. Luis nodded, visibly relieved. So it really was a fuel leak he detected. Emma smiled proudly as Wildfire walked calmly to the designated transport area. Was there ever any doubt? With Wildfire secured and comfortable in the cargo hold, Emma took her seat in the passenger cabin for the short flight to Denver. The airline had upgraded her to first class as a gesture of appreciation. Though Emma would have been content anywhere she could keep an eye on Wildfire through the small internal window connecting to the cargo area. Captain Hayes completed his pre-flight checks with meticulous care in the cockpit. He and First Officer Bennett ran through each system twice, paying particular attention to fuel pressure readings. Everything checks out, Bennett confirmed. We're good to go, Hayes nodded, then addressed the passengers over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Hayes. I want to thank you for your extraordinary patience today. We're clear for departure and should arrive in Denver in approximately 1 hour, and I can assure you that our special passenger in the cargo hold seems perfectly content with this aircraft. A light ripple of laughter moved through the cabin, followed by spontaneous applause. The day's events had created an unusual camaraderie among the passengers, a shared experience that had transformed strangers into a community with a common story. As the engine spooled up, Emma watched Wildfire carefully through the small window. The Mustang remained calm, showing no signs of the earlier distress. When the aircraft began taxiing toward the runway, he adjusted his stance slightly to accommodate the movement, but otherwise appeared completely at ease. Dr. Reynolds, seated across the aisle from Emma, observed the horse's behavior with professional interest. Remarkable, he commented. Compare this to his reaction earlier today night, and day difference. Emma nodded. He knows this plane is safe, which confirms that his previous behavior was a direct response to a specific threat. Reynolds concluded, not generalized anxiety about flying as the aircraft accelerated down the runway and lifted into the sky. Emma felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride in Wildfire's extraordinary perceptiveness, gratitude that someone had finally taken his behavior seriously, and a touch of melancholy knowing that this flight was taking him to Wildfire's new home at Jennifer's therapy program. The short flight to Denver passed uneventfully. Wildfire remained calm throughout, even during the brief turbulence as they crossed the mountain range. When they finally touched down at Denver International Airport, another round of spontaneous applause erupted from the passengers. Captain Hayes' voice came over the intercom. One final time, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Denver. Before we depart, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the extraordinary circumstances of our journey. Today, in my 25 years as a pilot, I've never experienced anything quite like it. I believe we all owe a debt of gratitude to one special passenger who couldn't join us in the cabin, but is definitely the hero of today's story. More applause followed, along with a few good-natured whinnies mimicked by the passengers, causing laughter to spread through the cabin. The shared experience had created a unique bond. Strangers united by a brush with danger they'd never actually experienced, thanks to a Mustang's keen senses. As the passengers deplaned, many stopped to thank Emma personally, some asking to visit the cargo hold for a glimpse of Wildfire security protocols prevented this, but the sentiment touched Emma deeply. Your horse is amazing, David Miller told her enthusiastically, his mother smiling behind him. Will he stay in Denver? Emma nodded. He's going to help people at a therapy ranch. Like a therapy dog, but a horse? David asked, exactly like that. Emma confirmed, he'll be working with veterans and children with special needs. David's eyes widened, so he's going to keep saving people, just in a different way. The simple wisdom in the child's observation struck Emma powerfully, yes. She agreed softly. That exactly right on the tarmac at Denver International, a small welcoming committee awaited Wildfire's arrival. Jennifer Whitaker, Emma's daughter, stood beside a specialized horse trailer emblazoned with the logo of Healing Hooves Therapy Ranch at 32. Jennifer shared her mother's affinity for horses, but had channeled it into therapeutic applications, Mom. Jennifer called, waving as Emma descended the aircraft stairs. They embraced warmly, the family resemblance evident in their similar profiles and determined chins. Quite the dramatic journey. Emma said, returning her daughter's hug. Wait until you hear the full story. I've already heard some of it, Jennifer replied with bemused expression. The pilot radioed ahead about the heroic Mustang that detected a fuel leak. I thought they were joking at first. Emma shook her head. No joke. Wildfire refused to let that plane take off. He knew something was wrong as they talked. The cargo door opened, and the ground crew began the process of unloading Wildfire. The Mustang's ears perked forward at the sight of the new surroundings, his nostrils flaring. As he processed the unfamiliar sense of Denver International, Jennifer watched with growing appreciation. As Wildfire was carefully led down the ramp, he looks magnificent, Mom. The photos didn't do him justice. Wait until you work with him, Emma replied. Proudly, his intelligence and sensitivity are extraordinary. After the day's events, I don't doubt it, Jennifer said. The veterans in our program will be amazed when they hear this story. Olivia Caldwell approached, camera in hand. Ms. Whitaker, I was hoping to get a few final shots of Wildfire as he meets his new handler. Would that be all right? Emma looked at Jennifer, who nodded her consent. Of course, this is my daughter, Jennifer. By the way, she runs a therapy program where Wildfire will be working. Perfect, Olivia replied enthusiastically. I'd love to include information about the therapy program in my documentary. It adds another dimension to Wildfire's story, from wild Mustang to life-saving hero to healer. Jennifer led them toward the horse trailer, where Wildfire will make the final leg of his journey to the ranch. We're about an hour outside Denver. She explained, we have 40 acres. With specialized facilities for equine therapy, Wildfire will have plenty of space and important work to do. As Wildfire was guided toward the trailer, a small crowd of airport workers gathered to watch. Word had spread quickly about the unusual incident in Wyoming, and many were curious to see the oar at the center of the story. Is that him? One baggage handler asked another. The horse that detected the fuel leak. That's what they're saying. His colleague confirmed, refused to let the plane take off until they found the problem. Smart animal. The first man commented, watching as Wildfire calmly followed Emma toward the trailer. Captain Hayes emerged from the terminal, having completed his post-flight duties. He approached Emma and Jennifer as Wildfire was being loaded into the trailer. And Whitaker, he called, I wanted to say goodbye before you left and to thank you again. Emma smiled warmly. Captain Hayes, this is my daughter, Jennifer. She'll be Wildfire's new caretaker. Hayes shook Jennifer's hand. Your mother and her remarkable horse made quite an impression today. I've already calls from our corporate safety division and the FAA about the incident. It's becoming quite the story, Jennifer acknowledged. As it should, Hayes replied, seriously beyond the human interest angle. There are genuine safety implications. Our industry relies heavily on technology for fault detection, but today demonstrated its limitations rather dramatically. As they spoke, Sam Harrison approached with his press credentials visible. Captain Hayes, Sam Harrison from the Bridger Creek Gazette. Could I get a few quotes about today's incident from my article? Hayes glanced at Emma, who nodded her permission. Of course, he told the reporter, though I should warn you that the facts sound rather unbelievable without having witnessed them firsthand. The best stories often do. Sam replied with a smile, notepad ready, while Hayes recounted the events for reporter. Emma took a private moment with Wildfire before the trailer door closed. She stroked his neck gently, the familiar texture of his coat beneath her fingers of comfort. After the day's stress, you're going to do great things at Jennifer's ranch, she told him softly, just as you did today, though perhaps with a bit less drama. Wildfire nickered softly, nudging her shoulder in the affectionate gesture she had come to cherish. Their communication transcended words, a bond built through years of mutual trust and respect. Jennifer approached, quietly watching their interaction with understanding. It's never easy to say goodbye, is it? Emma smiled wistfully. No, but knowing he'll be with you makes it bearable. And after today, I think he's proven he still has important work to do. The veterans in our program will benefit tremendously from working with him, Jennifer assured her, especially Those dealing with PTSD, they respond to animals that demonstrate heightened awareness. It validates their own hypervigilance in a healing way as the trailer door closed with Wildfire. Safely inside, Emma felt a chapter closing in her life. The journey that had begun 3 years ago at the controversial Wild Horse Roundup had come full circle. The Mustang, who had once run free across the Wyoming plains, would now help heal invisible wounds in those who had sacrificed for their country. Ready to head to the ranch, Jennifer asked gently, sensing her mother's emotions. Emma nodded, taking one last look at the trailer, where Wildfire waited patiently for the next stage of his journey. Yes, it's time for his new. Beginning the drive from Denver International Airport to Healing Hooves Therapy Ranch took just under an hour. Emma rode with Jennifer in the truck, pulling Wildfire's trailer, while Olivia Caldwell followed in a rental car, occasionally stopping to capture footage of the picturesque Colorado landscape. As they traveled further from the city-urban sprawl, gave way to rolling pastures and distant mountain views, the autumn colors painted the countryside in vibrant golds and reds, creating a postcard-worthy backdrop for their journey. It's beautiful out here, Emma commented, watching the scenery pass by. Different from Wyoming, but beautiful in its own way. Jennifer nodded, navigating a gentle curve in a road the veterans love, the peace and quiet. Many of them come from urban areas, so this environment is healing in itself. Tell me more about your program, Emma prompted. Your calls and emails have given me the basics, but I'd like to understand exactly what Wildfire will be doing. Jennifer's face lit up with passion for her work. We focus primarily on veterans with PTSD and traumatic brain